Next, we're going to talk about the bass drum. But obviously, to be able to play the bass drum, we have to use a bass drum pedal. So we're going to talk about all the different parts of the pedal and how they work, the different components, and how everything operates. There are lots of different pedals on the market, and people like all sorts of different aspects of different types of pedals. This particular one has a base plate. Not all pedals have a base plate. This base plate has a little rubber grip on the bottom so that it doesn't skid. Some of them have Velcro on the bottom. Some of them have no plate at all. This is called the heel plate, and that's where your heel goes when you're playing. And then this is the footboard, where the rest of your foot sits as you're using it. Moving forward here, we have the spring. I think pretty much every pedal on the market has an adjustable spring tension. And we'll get into exactly how that works. This particular pedal can be adjusted here and here. We have this part here, it's called the cam, and that affects exactly the way that the chain right here or the strap drive moves, how quickly it moves. And this is the beater, and the shaft of the beater can be raised or lowered here with this adjustment. We have the posts here, and then down at the bottom, this particular one has a spot for a drum key, but what every pedal does have is some sort of mechanism to clamp down onto the hoop of the bass drum. The pedal basically operates as a springboard. When you press the footboard down, the cam pulls the chain, which then puts the beater forward and you hit the head. Now, one of the most important adjustments you can make on the pedal is with the spring tension. If the tension is too tight, you'll have a hard time pushing it down, pushing it forward, getting it to hit the head. If the tension is too loose, it'll kind of hang back and it'll be real loosey-goosey and it won't actually bounce back in the way that you want. You notice if I just touch this pedal with my finger, it operates really smoothly and comes back and forth easily, and that's the general tension that you want to have on the pedal. Another important element to the functionality of the pedal is the beater. This is a Vic Kick beater, and it has felt, so it's not too hard, but it's also weighted in a way that it has a little bit more weight in the shaft, so it feels good when it's at sort of an optimum height. If you move the shaft down, it's going to change the feel of the pedal because it's going to put the weight down further and it'll be a little easier to move it forward. If you pull it back, it's going to give you more weight at the top and you're going to have to work a little harder to push it forward. Some people like it back with more throw where it's a little heavier. Some people like it down where it's easier to push forward. But you can make that adjustment here on just about any pedal with any beater. The final thing with this pedal is the spurs. Now these can be twisted to go down or twisted to the left to go up. And what they are for is when you're on a surface like a carpet, they will dig into that carpet and make it so that the pedal will not slide forward while you're playing. Be careful though, if you're playing on a wood surface or something that you don't want to scratch, you have to make sure these are up and out of the way. Not every pedal has these, but most modern pedals do. So if you're on a wood floor or a surface that will slide and scratch, these will scratch it if they're down, but if you're on a carpet, they will help to keep everything in place. Another important element of your setup is a drum rug. Now, I would advise against setting your drums up on a wood floor or a vinyl floor or anything like that because they're going to move all around without a rug. And I would also advise against just setting them on a carpet in a room because the spurs could potentially dig into that carpet and damage it. And also the pedals will sometimes leave some grease or oil and stain the carpet. So you want to have a dedicated drum rug. This is a Zildjian Deluxe drum rug. It is designed specifically for a drum set. It's the perfect size for an average kit. The corners are weighted so that they don't curl up, and the entire backing is non-skid, so it won't move while you're playing. Now, it's also designed so that when your spurs dig into it, it's strong enough so that it won't rip, but it'll keep your drums in place. The other thing that's great about it is that it is thin enough that you can just roll it right up, and it has built-in clips to clip it together so it won't come unrolled, and it's small enough that it'll fit right in your car. Now it's time to talk about the bass drum. So this, just like the snare drum, has two heads. A batter head on this side where the pedal hits, and this most heads will come with a little impact patch so that you don't bust through, because the beater hits in exactly the same spot every time, so that one little spot will wear out. This is the front head, or the resonant head. This particular drum has a hole here, a port hole, and that's primarily designed for miking the drum. You don't need to worry too much about that. If your front head doesn't have a hole, that's totally fine. The shell is typically made of wood for the bass drum, and usually made of plies. This particular one is made of maple and mahogany. This is a DW Collector's drum. And you'll see here the lugs. There are lugs that go to each side. There's not just one lug in the middle for this particular thing. And the hoops are wood, and they have claws that the tension rods go through to put the tension on the heads. This drum also has a mount here for the toms. Some drums have holes where the toms are mounted inside of the drum, and then the mounts come out. And then the final element about the bass drum is the spurs. There are several different types of spurs, but they are basically designed so that when you put the drum down and play it, it doesn't move. We'll talk about tuning the bass drum and head selection and muffling and all that in another video, but for right now, let's talk about setup. So, you want to be seated comfortably on your throne with your legs sloping downward slightly, and then you want to make sure that your heel is directly below your knee. If your foot is too far forward, you're going to run into trouble operating the pedals that way. And if it's too far back, you have no range of motion really in your ankle. So comfortably like this. And you notice if I'm facing forward, my legs are at about 11 and 1, right? But a lot of times when you set up the bass drum, you want to have it facing directly forward. So you're not going to move your leg and stay like this. You can just shift your position over to 10 and 12. It's important when you're setting up the bass drum to be seated comfortably and then move the pedal to where your foot is naturally positioned. This way you're not having to adjust yourself to the gear, you're adjusting the gear to yourself. So I'm seated comfortably here, and I can put the pedal right where my foot was, and when I put it down, I'm in a comfortable position. This way, if I have to make any adjustments, I can just move the pedal slightly, and I'm not having to bend over and pick up the whole bass drum with the toms attached to it and move it around. It's much easier to operate this way. So get your pedal in place and then attach your bass drum to the pedal. Now with my pedal in place, I can grab my bass drum and set it right into the hoop clamp. Once it's where I need it to be, I can then tighten the hoop clamp right onto the hoop. Again, don't over tighten this because you could damage your drum. Now that we're all set up and everything's in the right place, let's play some notes on the bass drum. There are two basic ways to play the bass drum: with your heel up, where your heel comes off of the pedal and your leg comes up in the air, and then you use the weight of your leg to play the note, and then heel down, where your heel stays on the pedal the whole time and you play the notes with the front part of your foot like you're tapping your foot. So I'll play a few examples of each of those. Here's heel up. Heel down. Let's talk about heel down playing. I would consider this to be the most basic way to play the bass drum because your foot is just relaxed, sitting, and essentially you're just tapping your toe forward. Now, this type of playing is really good for relaxed, lighter playing. It's easy to play for a long time. It's not quite as fatiguing. The downside of playing heel down is that you can't play quite as loudly as you can with the heel up. and you can't play quite as fast. Let's play some notes in the heel down position along with some music. I'll count it in, play along with me, and if you don't have a drum, you can just tap your foot on the floor. Now, one thing I definitely want to mention is that you want the beater to hit the head and bounce back off. That's called playing off the head. So you want the beater to hit and bounce right back off. To be able to do that, you can't have tension going forward in your toes and in your foot. You can't push it and leave it. You have to be relaxed and just let it naturally bounce back with the tension from the spring. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. You're going to want to practice some single notes on the bass drum along with music as much as you can. Now, if you do it a lot, you're going to get pretty tired. But if you just play a song or two, you shouldn't have any pain or really any issues in your shin or in your calf or anything like that. If you're experiencing anything like that, you're working too hard. Your spring might be too tight, or you're pushing too hard and bearing the beater or something like that. It should be fairly easy to do. So now let's talk about heel up. This is used by a lot of drummers, and as I said, it's primarily used to be able to get more power behind your stroke by using the weight of your leg, and in some instances for speed, like metal drummers, they kind of hold their legs up, they sort of hover and then play the pedals with their legs up to be able to play really fast. We're not going to get into that particular technique, but we will play some heel up notes. So in this instance, you're lifting your heel and then dropping your whole leg. So after each note, my heel actually drops all the way down to the pedal, and I have a little micro relaxation so that I'm not having tension in my hip flexor or tension in my leg when I'm not playing the pedal. I want to address burying the beater or leaving the beater in contact with the head after you play the note. Now, when you bury the beater, it stops the resonance from the head, so it's a very dry, short sound. I really want to encourage you, if you're going to play heel up, to learn how to play with the beater off the head. If you learn that technique, it's very easy to bury the beater if you're playing a type of music that calls for that, or if you want that kind of a sound. If you want more resonance, you can't really get it unless you bring the beater back off the head. So let's go really slowly. I'm just going to play a couple notes for you and watch the mechanics of how my foot moves and how it works. So I lift up my heel first. This is in super slow-mo. I lift my heel first, so it takes a little bit of effort from my hip, and then I drop the weight of my leg down and play the note, but then immediately after the note hits, my foot and my ankle are relaxed, and essentially it's the weight of my foot that's stopping the beater in place. So I'll play a couple of those notes in real time so you can see it. So let's play some notes along with the music again. I'll count you in. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. You might be wondering which technique is best for you. I would definitely advise you to learn how to play with your heel up and with your heel down. There are going to be musical situations that call for one or the other, or both. I would say that most professional drummers can do both and use both according to the style of music, the venue they're in, how loud they need to play, how fast they need to play, how long the gig might happen to be. So I would definitely encourage you to work on both of these techniques. I've moved my snare drum into position here. A couple things to watch out for. Make sure that the tripod legs on the stand are not going to be in the way of your pedals at all, where your feet are comfortably positioned, and that the snare drum is at the right height. So we're going to play some alternating strokes on the snare drum with some bass drum, but before we get into that, I want to talk about hearing protection. Drums are loud, and it is incredibly important to protect your ears. As a musician, they're one of the most important tools that you have. So there are lots of options out there. You can get from the cheapest thing, you can get just the foam earplugs. They will protect your ears. They don't sound as great. If you want something that sounds a little better and still protects your ears, the Vic plug made by Vic Firth is really nice. It's a little more high-end than the foam plugs. And getting even better than that, Vic Firth also makes these isolation headphones similar to these, like the ones that you would see like at the gun range or something like that. And they really protect your ears from loud noises. And then to go a step further from that, these particular isolation phones are stereo headphones where you can plug in and listen to music and play along with music without having to turn the music up very loud. So you won't damage your ears when you're playing along to music with something like that. If you want to go a step even beyond that, Zildjian makes in-ear monitors, and they have soft rubber tips where they plug into your ears and isolate. So again, you can keep the volume of the music very low, but you can play along full volume and hear everything without having it be too loud. And the benefit of those is nobody can really tell you're wearing them. So you have lots of options out there, so check them out and see what works for you. Now we're going to play some alternating singles or a single stroke roll on the snare drum along with some notes on the bass drum. We're going to use the heel up technique, and we're going to start with the right hand. Now, a couple things to pay attention to. You're going to notice that your right hand is together with your right foot on this, and the tendency is going to be to play the right hand louder and with a higher stroke. So try to pay attention and make sure that your right and left hand are both at the same level of your stroke and that the sound is the same, even though you're playing the bass drum along with the right hand. So bass drum first. 1, 2, bass drum only, go. Now that we're comfortable with that, we're going to bring in the hands. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. 1, 2, ready, go. You may find that the coordination of this is fairly difficult. If that's the case, remember what I said before, slow it down. And also you can take it in much smaller chunks. So if you want, you could play much slower and just do 4 counts with the bass drum and then 4 counts with the hands and then take the hands out. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Back to just the bass drum. Take it as slowly as you need to be successful with this exercise. Your assignment with this exercise is going to be to work on it at a variety of tempos. Again, if you're having trouble, back it way down, break down the exercise. You can do one hand at a time. You can play at a variety of tempos, and one thing that's really going to help with this is to play along with a metronome. Now you want to be right on top of that click sound when you're playing with a metronome, and you want to get both the bass drum and the snare drum to be right on top of that. And then once you master that at a certain tempo, you can bump it up a little bit, or you can play along with some music. But when you're playing along to the music, Make sure you're paying attention to what you're playing and you're not just getting lost in the music. Make sure that you're aware of what your body is doing and how you're sounding. And then work on it as much as you can until you get comfortable enough that you can do it without even really having to think about it. Because once you get to that level, you're ready to go to the next step. In our next video, we're going to add another instrument to the kit, a very important instrument called the hi-hat.